Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Friday update, also known as Trust But Verify. What you're looking at is the last Titan missile silo in existence. There was about 12. This one, the others have been blown up and destroyed, and this one is now a museum in Arizona. The mock-up of the missile that you're looking at could basically wipe out a city completely. Now, when it comes to checking the author, I was looking around at the photos and brought up this because this is a great example of not of the Russians, but of our own government. In the 50s, the Cold War, when it really took off, certain people in the government, the military, and the weapons industry said, oh my goodness, there's a bomber gap. The Russians have way more bombers than us. It wasn't true. The Russians knew that. The American people didn't, and so we put all this money into bombers. Oh no, there's a missile gap too. We don't have, the Russians have more missiles. Both of these were false, and the government knew it, but Russia watches us pour all this money into missiles and bombers and say, uh-oh, we better put money into missiles and bombers. And then the politicians say, see, look at all that money they're putting into missiles and bombers. Compressing it all. But that's why one of the reasons you want to verify, right? Because just because somebody is supposed to be telling you the truth doesn't mean they will, right? And typically everybody has their own needs, wants, and values, and it will determine how much of the truth they actually tell you. So why check authors? Well, because just because somebody wrote a book and took that time doesn't, how in the world does that mean somebody is ethical or fair? Every book has an audience, every book has an author with an agenda, and even if it's to inform, they're picking particular things to inform you about, which means they're leaving something else. The book is 300 pages long, not 3 billion pages long, so it can't cover everything. The author is picking and choosing, so it's your job, right, as an adult who's using critical thinking to say, okay, how's the argument look? Is it making sense on the first level? And then also, what evidence are they using and checking into it? Now, that's exhausting, as some of you have already found out, right? And so you don't want to do it all the time. You can't do it all the time. But when you get to those issues that really matter to you that you're making decisions about or have to write a paper about, that's definitely when you start looking. So I really enjoyed going through and seeing all of the things from going back to 1887 and seeing this sort of difficult thing to read, but yep, that's what the person said. That's that main idea. Hasn't been changed to, so many of these were great and it took work and you put in evidence, you put in effort to see what's going on. And the nice thing is once you do that, right, you wouldn't check every single thing in a book. But if you spot check one or two ideas, right, and they pan out, then I think it's safe for giving credibility, which is also nice about when you get really informed about a topic, you are going to know certain things that will really help you decide, oh, right, if for example, the history of the military-industrial complex, even a little bit about it. Then the next time somebody starts telling you, about what we need for our defense, you'll be like going, okay, yes, and maybe, right? So the more you learn about a particular subject, the better you'll be able to be at spotting credibility and maybe red flags, things that say, hey, this is not going to be that credible, right? So a really nice job, right? People checking these sources, you can see what they did, and you're not going to do it for everything, but you definitely want to do it a couple times, right? Especially if you're going to then take somebody's idea, put your spin on it, and pass that on. You want to make sure you are not perpetuating some falsehood, right? Or some idea that just doesn't stand up. Okay. Along those lines, there's a person you may have heard of, Sam Harris. In the past, didn't even really know him, but wasn't a big fan of him. The little that I knew, thought he was kind of a jerk, and he still might be, I don't know. But I was talking to a friend of mine who brought up Sam Harris and said, I'm listening to this podcast, you should check it out. This was just this week. And so I said, Okay, sounded really interesting. And then he sends me the link. It's actually Sam Harrison talking to Jonathan Haidt, right? The author of our book, who I do like. And it's funny, those two got in some mean, nasty email exchange or something that they mentioned in the beginning, right? Both of them sort of went past the bonds of civil discourse, right? And so I listened to it, and wherever I got those first ideas of Sam Harris, as I'm listening to this interview, I'm like, well, guy seems pretty fair and straightforward and a good discussion. So I don't know where even those things fully came from, right? And I might be, because I do believe he's an atheist, I might be locking him in with, and great if you're an atheist, I don't care. You'll notice, I don't care. I'm going to rephrase that, because that would sound like I'm not respecting it. Wherever your beliefs are theologically, I respect that, and there's reasons for it, whichever your beliefs are. There's a few, like a guy named Hitchens, who just are jerks. And it's funny, I even read an article saying about one of the problems with new atheism is the speakers of new atheism, because so many of them come across as a jerk, and so their message gets lost in how it's delivered, right? I much rather listen to Ricky Gervais, right, talking about atheism and his beliefs in it than the Hitchenson's guy, just because of the attitude is entirely different. And yet he has, here's my clear logic, he doesn't back down talking about Ricky Gervais, and he's funny. But if you want to just see a quick little thing of that, go to YouTube, Ricky Gervais, atheism, and some stuff will pop up, and you can see how he talks about it, and then put in Hitchenson's and see how he talks about it. And then what you would be doing is finding out for yourself if Steve is full of crap or not. Also, if you have sort of the same taste in what makes a jerk as I do, because you might just go, hey, Steve, Hitchens, I'm sorry, I'm butchering his name. Hitchens is just telling it like it is. So why are you getting all upset? Because maybe that's the case. But the point being is, if you are human, like me, and I assume you're human, you might have some ideas about the people about the stuff that you read and the people who wrote it that don't pan out, right? That did not pan out. Because now that I've listened to him, I'm going to actually listen to more of his stuff. I think it was interesting. So I'm hooked. Another thing I did is, you do want to, right, when possible, talk to people who know the field, right? And listen to what they say. But that also means, just because they're an expert, for example, doesn't mean you shut off your brain, doesn't mean that you blindly accept everything, right? But it means you should probably consider what they're saying. So in my psychology class that I'm taking for fun, I like Carl Jung because of the archetypes. I teach mythology class this semester. I think there's some really cool things about archetypes that can help us understand what's going on. And when I'm working with people too, sometimes when I do mentoring, it's really, if you're working with a 15-year-old boy and you talk about the warrior, the lover, the king, right, or the magician, those can be archetypes that, like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then you can have a fuller discussion, which is something that comes from Jung. So I asked her what she thought, and she's like, don't like him. Slept with one of his patients. A lot of his stuff hasn't panned out as far as research goes. And I'm like, oh man. So I went and looked. Yeah, he did sleep with one of his patients, and she ended up going on and being a successful psychologist on her own. And I was at the library the other day, and here's a movie about that affair. And actually, Jung and Freud got into a big fight over this, because it's like, hey, buddy, even back then they're going, not too ethical sleeping with your patient. So he did that. I would be in denial if, like I said, I didn't. And to look into, and I think this is what to me was probably the best thing I got out of asking this professor about Jung, is she said, what does the research show of those ideas? I'm like, dang, that's powerful, right? So like somebody, don't like somebody, what's the research say about their ideas? So just an example of, I really want you to, in this, don't just look for the people, confirmation bias, right, who are going to look at you name it, just like you. You want to find some of those critics. You want to find people who are going to, talk about hope in a positive way, and you want to find somebody else who's going to point out hope can be a disaster, because it can stop you from doing the things, admitting to reality and doing the things that you need to get done. And hope can help you survive terrible situations. It's not just one or the other. So that was the bit that I wanted to cover. And as you're doing this paper, I want you to keep your eyes open, look for multiple views. Now, as far as outlines go, and over the weekend, I hope to get through everybody's outline, right? Here's an example, right? Really nice example, great job. It's going to be 10 out of 10 for the assignment, right? Doing just what I ask. And now I'm going to be able to give some feedback. So I thought I would use this one. And if you look at it, regular meditation isn't just short-term relaxation. It can rewire your brain. Okay, so this is interesting, right? Going into meditation and what does it do? Now, looking at this, and I like this statement. It's not a question yet, so it'd be like maybe the working thesis could be, in addition to short-term relaxation, how does meditation rewire the brain, right? So you'd want to, actually, no, I'm sorry. That would be the research question. Here's the thesis. So looking at it this way, right now, I think this rewiring the brain is super interesting, and it makes sense that you would talk a little bit about the relaxation. Now, looking at the outline, only this one part, C, seems to be really on that rewiring part. So, good outline, shows me what you're thinking, and then I would be like, hey, you might want to condense some of this, because I don't know if celebrities really, it's an idea, maybe you go into it, maybe you don't need it, but if you can think about a big portion of your paper is rewiring the brain, then there should probably be more than one section on that, right? So good outline. This person hasn't even, has barely started the research. So I like this. It's not like a negative criticism. It's just like, okay, moving forward, if this is the part is a big part of your interest, that should show up. Now, how do you take rewiring the brain, for example, and look at it from different ideas? Well, one, and they're right on track here. Check out this. Looking at the brain's MRIs, EEGs, neuroscience, right? Neurology. That's definitely going to be a place to look at how it can rewire the brain. And so that's the one. Very Western, going to be interesting. Now, where does meditation come from? So this might even be a case where now you go back maybe to Hinduism and look at about how, because yoga isn't just about relaxing, at least if you look at back where it starts from and what it's supposed to do, right? And so all of a sudden there, if you start looking into Hinduism, you're going to find out meditation is tied to how we see the world, and the fact that we don't even see the world. What we see is an illusion, and we need, we need to meditate so we can clear out the illusion and actually see into what it is. So that part, right? Maybe looking at, and see, this is actually mentioned in here, coming up with the various religions. But that might be a part too of, there is the rewiring of the brain that science shows us. Then there are these religious acts and how they say the rewiring works, right? Because maybe for science, rewiring is changing pathways, right? Literal pathways in the brain. Whereas for religion, that rewiring might be short-circuiting desire, right? Meditation is a way to learn how to let go of desire, right? So nice outline. You'll notice it's in sentence format, which is just what I was asking for. So really good. And now you can start looking at, and I'll give you feedback. Everybody should hopefully have feedback by Monday night on their outline, which will have a couple things like maybe a little bit more of this, don't forget this angle, or look at that angle. You are not held to this because you're going to do research and you might find other areas of interest. But I wanted to show you that example. It's a good one, full sentences, and just to give you a little bit of feedback too about how to expand it. All right, and then the last part, homework for Monday, is your introduction. Right, it's a working one, but I do want you to have one, right? I'm gonna have assignments, so you keep you writing. Make sure to look at the handout, right? Because I want you to have an intro that's gonna get our attention, right? Set the stage, and then end with the thesis, the working thesis. So, go through this, make sure you're using one or two of these strategies, right? And then post your introduction here, right? And this is going to be broken into groups of about 10 people. And so you'll probably have anywhere from 6 to 8 actual introductions to read. Read them, let them know, hey, you really grabbed my attention because, or you know what, I get what you're doing, but I don't feel like it gets my interest. What if you tried this? So give them real feedback, right, about does it set the stage? Because if, say, their working thesis is that has something about rewiring the brain, and there's nothing in the introduction really about rewiring or the brain, you say, hey, how is this setting up your thesis? Right? So that's your introduction, and then I want you to take one of those sources that you've already found that you like, and write a page, based off that idea, right? You set up, here's the idea, here's where, basically I'm asking you to write one page of the body of your paper, give or take, and using one of your sources as sort of like your starting point. If you want to use 2 sources, you sure can, but the main thing is I want you to start organizing, take that resource that you're like pretty darn sure you're going to use, start with that one, right? I think that covers it. So let me know if you have questions. I think in the last week and next week, I'm starting to set up more appointments with people who are doing Skype or coming to my office. All of that is welcome. Just let me know and we'll get something, on the schedule. So keep working. I know if you're in Minnesota, it's really nice out, which is a cruel thing to do at the end of the semester, but we've got about 3 weeks left and then you're done. So I always say end of semester, foot on the gas, right? Let's get to the let's get to the end of the semester, right, at full speed.